All right. Episode, I don't know which episode number. We had Tonya Schulte on here today.
We're chugging along.
What are we going to talk about, Reece? What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, so Tonya Schulte did a great job with the Profit Constructors. And this is going to be a great episode for any builder contractor that's looking to translate the vision for their organization into actionable metrics, focusing on the what's, the why's, the how's, and ultimately how that plays into them having more certainty into their business. Largely, obviously, revolving around the financial side of things. But this is a great podcast to take vision to execution from a metric standpoint and to play.
Yeah, no, I thought Tonya shared a lot of wisdom on the podcast. So let's get into it.
Awesome. Tonya, we're happy to have you on. And for our listeners today, we're joined with Tonya Schulte, the queen of remodeling books. Tonya, go ahead and give the listeners a little background on yourself, the Profit Constructors. Tell us about yourself.
Reece, awesome. Look at that. I got a beard here this time.
Nice.
I think that's Bradford. Yeah, that's a Bradford non-athletic or non-alcoholic beer.
It's not alcoholic, and I also have a snake plant behind me. So
I love it.
My non-alcoholic beer and my snake plant. I don't know if that fits on the construction podcast, but
wait a minute. Let me guess. You're in Manhattan, New York.
Yeah.
Do we have to
all right. I
have to revoke your construction card? No.
All right. Let's get back to that.
Bush light in the fridge. Let's get into it. Tonya, tell the listeners who you are and what you're about.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun to hang out with you guys. I am Tonya Schulte. I'm the founder of the Profit Constructors. In February, I came like, we're counting down to this milestone. We'll have been around 9 years. And I have been doing construction accounting since 1997. It's all I've ever done. It's kind of my passion project. And really, it's transformed from like construction accounting is my passion project to helping construction company owners understand their numbers is my passion project. So myself and my internal team and our external co-firming team, that's really all of our passion project is really helping construction company owners understand their numbers and really free them up to like manage their business from a better place.
Love it. And Lord knows builders need help with understanding their numbers. 9 years, Tonya, that's awesome. Who all do you typically work with? Who do you typically work with?
Yeah, so we work with a wide variety of clients. Our typical marketing and our ICP is built around a specialty trades contractor. So I think HVAC, plumbers, framing, whatever those specialty trades are that are typically working right under the GC, that's who we typically work with. But we have some general contractors, we have some home builders. We have quite a few different folks on our roster that are peripheral to that, but our typical ICP, ideal client profile, is of a trade contractor. And in that small to like mid-market space.
Love it. Okay, so you're working predominantly with specialty contractors, roofing, electricals, plumbing, stuff like that. What's the bread and butter service that you offer to those guys? Is it the 90-day book remodeling? Am I botching the name? Is that
That's great. No, yeah, we call it.
I think it's a new service. No?
Yeah. Actually, so
okay.
This is our like brand new. We're like officially. We keep saying we're soft launching the 90-day remodel in December, and it's gonna be like going hard and heavy after it in the 2025. So let's talk about the 90-day remodel. The reason that we have basically created this service is our tagline from the beginning. You probably can't really see it. It's probably not real clear behind me, but on our sign back there, it says, "We help you run with the big dogs." And the goal, the idea behind "We help you run with the big dogs" has always been helping smaller construction companies who have this idea and this dream and this vision, but don't quite completely understand how the whole operation can work together. And it's specifically like how the back office supports the field. And so the idea behind "We help you run with the big dogs" is thinking about how does the back office support the field, and that's really what can fuel growth, right? Because if you can have scalable, repeatable process, which has to be built in the back office, then you can grow. And so that's always been the concept of what we do here. But to top it off, we are continuously encountering folks that have been doing this for a while and they want to run with the big dogs, but they're bottlenecked because they have specific things within their organization that they don't understand, and that they haven't ever been taught how to manage. And so it's those specific things that we're addressing with the 90-day remodel. And those are who owes you, so accounts receivable, billing. What do you owe? So accounts payable and spend, right? And cash flow, cash management. And literally there's so many of these guys that are bringing in good revenue, and they know that a lot of money is flowing out, but they don't know exactly what's coming in and what's going out. And so the whole idea behind the 90-day remodel is within 90 days to just completely take every bit of data and information that we can get our hands on and give you good actionable data that you can take back about who owes you, how soon you're going to collect that, who do you owe, and you have a regular planned system for how you're going to pay that out, and then really managing cash to the point that you start to build a reserve on the back end.
Yeah. Okay. And I know we dove right into it, but the 90-day remodel, as you should have picked up by now, is not a physical remodel of a house. It's the remodel of the accounting and
remodeling your books.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
I like the marketing. It's good.
Thank you. Yeah. Every single bit of the menu of services that we offer, we call it something. So like if we're doing your books, that's your financial maintenance crew. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's smart. So you're basically saying, hey, no matter where you are on your back office journey, Tonya's here to help you get to the right place, get to Nirvana in 90 days or less.
That's right. Right.
Well, and I think you made a comment, Tonya, about like, the little guys running with the big dogs, whatever the term is, right? The smaller businesses operating like big businesses, right? That's the big thing. Yep. And then you mentioned in terms of the synergy required from a repeatable process and back office process, helping the field.
Right.
I think that when we're talking to a lot of builders, the general consensus is like, the back office is just getting done. It's a have-to component of the business. Can you open up a little bit more from like your expertise and your background of working with hundreds of builders and contractors to explain why it's important to have synergy from your back office, how that impacts the field?
Yeah.
Obviously why a 90-day remodel would be important.
Yeah. I've been posting a lot about this on LinkedIn over the last month, but there's nothing that really hurts my heart more than when the back office kind of sees it as their job to make these really complicated systems that the field has to follow. Truly, right. I think that the synergy that you're talking about comes from ownership of every company having a solid vision of what they're trying to build, and from the field and the back office really having a good grasp of how to work together to make that vision come to life. And a big piece of that, I feel like from the back office that often gets missed is there's a lot of struggle because the owner might want to see certain metrics. They might have an idea of what KPIs they need to know. And so the back office feels this pressure to create these really massive systems to get to those KPIs. And then that just encourages the field to give up, right? Because if you have 40,000 cost codes and at the end of the day, your field guy is trying to build a house and manage 40,000 cost codes, he doesn't care anymore. And then there's this constant struggle between the back office and the field because the back office feels the pressure to meet these certain metrics, hand over reports with certain data, and the field just doesn't have time to do all that. So where I believe that synergy comes into play is by starting with the end goal in mind of like, okay, what is that metric? And then bringing all of the stakeholders into the room and saying, okay, we know that we have this metric that we have to meet, but we also know that in order to meet that metric, we have to actually also be doing the work. And so how do we get the field in line that they can do the work and give data back to the back office in a very streamlined system and in a way that actually makes sense and that everyone can manage? So that's where I think that synergy really comes in.
Now, even more specific, could you just give a little snip of what that streamlining looks like? I don't want you just giving away, pro bono consulting here, but I think it's important, to really, because I think when you're talking to a lot of builders, it can get kind of overwhelming when you think about KPIs and metrics, and a lot of these guys are like, dude, I just want to be an electrician. I just want to build a house. That's just what I want to do, and that's where are you monetizing a hobby or are you running a business, right? That's kind of like my little tagline. But I think it's important to break it down into something a little more palatable. Like, what does that actually look like not having 40,000 cost codes? What's a little snip in that streamlined process for the listener to start wrapping their mind around and making this seem like a more approachable conversation?
Well, yeah, I think well, I would just add, I think that's right, Reece, like we getting into the examples, but I think, Tonya, that the way you laid it out, like having a good vision, like what's the goal, starting with the goal and then working backwards from that, I think is helpful. So I think that what Reece had suggested earlier was that, a lot of smaller customers out there might just say like, hey, we're building houses. So long as the customer's happy, that's what matters. Like the money will be in the bank at the end of the day, and are a little bit less like metrics driven. Right. Mm-hmm. I think that's maybe a little bit more of the issue we've seen is like, there's not like an emphasis on why we even have to track these numbers and really, really pay close attention to them. And so what is an example of like if you're in the 90-day remodel, you're like, hey, here's a metric we're going to start tracking as a business and why it matters. Right. And then how do you work backwards to like get the stakeholders in the room, explain why it matters to them, and then put the streamlined process in place. I think that would be a really, really helpful way to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's if you start to get into like all these accounting terms, which we're going to try and avoid and stay away from, but like in the accounting world, people call it days sales outstanding, right? Like, and so this is like, we're leading into the first component of the 90-day remodel, which is, I think it's very easy to go out to do the work and maybe even to be, although sometimes this isn't even happening, but a lot of times you can still even like issue invoices out to the client. But then we forget to go and collect on the invoices.
Yep.
Right. And so a big, huge metric that we would start to track is like, when you have invoiced, how soon after you have invoiced are you collecting that money? And that's it. It's that simple metric. Like, once we've invoiced, let's start counting the days until we get that cash through the door. And so the reason that metric matters is obvious cash flow, right? Like, if you are the business owner that's doing a great job, you're giving quality work, you're putting the electrical stuff in the walls really well, but you're losing sleep at night because you're not sure if you're going to make payroll next week, that could be one of the main metrics that we're not tracking. We might have issued invoices, but no one is tasked on our team or held accountable on our team for making sure that cash is coming through the door. So that's like one of the simplest metrics that we would start with.
Yep. Okay. Total sense. So day sales outstanding is how long does it take you to get paid after you send out an invoice or pay app or draw or whatever to the client?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And
the other side of it, like to add to that too, like once we know that, let's say that you're the type of client that works with maybe larger home builders. Let's say you're working with a large production home builder and they have a streamlined system for how you're supposed to submit your invoices and when they're going to pay, which we would recommend that our home builder clients do, right? Like let's set up systems. If that's the case, once you know that when I send this invoice to XYZ builder company, it's going to take them 30 days to process, turn around, and get the money back to me. If you know that ahead of time, now we start to do cash management. Now we start to plan and say, well, I have to make sure I get my invoices out by X date because now I know it's going to take 30 days from X date to bring that money in, right? So that's where these types of conversations happen between the field and the back office, that maybe the field is like, I don't understand, Marjorie, in the back office, why you care so much about me getting all these receipts in. And Marjorie's like, because if I don't get the receipts and if I don't understand costs, I can't do the next step, which is get that invoice out. And the longer that I wait to get that invoice out, the more time it's going to take for us to get paid. And you might not be able to get paid on your next paycheck, right? Like, so having those very clear conversations between the field and the back office about the importance of each task and why I'm asking you to do that task is where all the synergy starts to come in.
Got it. Okay, great. Yeah. So generally, I mean, I think maybe it's like obvious why it's important to get paid fast, but I guess we kind of, whatever. We don't need to explain why it's important to get paid fast. Hopefully people know it's important to get paid fast. And then, so you've kind of taken that as like, all right, we want to have day sales outstanding as short as possible. Or if we know it's 30 days, we want to send the invoices out sooner. Do you track a metric separately for that maybe is a little bit less about when I sent the invoice and how soon I then get paid? And it's just a matter of like how quickly I'm sending out invoices, how frequently your customers are sending out invoices?
You can. And again, it depends on business model, right? Again, that's where we like go into the drawing board and say, okay, what business are we building? Are we a trade contractor? Are we a general contractor? Who are we dealing with as a client? That kind of thing. So there's all kinds of different things that might go into that. So that's a whole other conversation. But I would say too, like in terms of most people know that it's important to get paid quickly. I agree with that, Matt. I think what most people don't think about is like whose responsibility is it to make sure that we get paid?
Yeah. Well, that's where you bring this. That's why you bring the stakeholders in a room, right?
Right. Exactly. And then we start to say, okay, because I think often when we bring all the stakeholders in the room, the owner might assume that it's the in-house bookkeeper's responsibility to make sure we get paid on time. Whereas she might be totally assuming that the owner is going to be making those calls or the project manager. Like until we have asked that question, whose responsibility is it to make sure that we're getting paid on time? And if it's not clear that it's someone's responsibility within the organization to do that task of picking up the phone and making sure we're getting paid, then that's where often on the AR side, we see the can just keep continuously getting kicked down the road because no one's taking responsibility for making sure that the money is coming in on time.
Okay. Interesting. So you essentially get everybody in a room and make people realize it's a collective effort, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And also give them the tools, right? Like what's the best tool to track these types of things?
Yeah. So how do you design the process? So now maybe the field before was like, oh, receipts, I don't care. I'm like tossing them out, whatever, And now they're like, oh wait, we got to get paid quickly. I got to get these receipts in. How do you keep track of whether they've actually done that? What are the systems you're using? Like how do you put these new systems in place?
Yeah. Well, and that's where, so this is why like the way that we think about it is going through the whole scenario of like what is important. So like getting the receipts back into the office is important. Okay. Why is that important? So it's a what, why, how process. So what is important is getting the receipts back into the office timely. Why is that important? Well, if we don't do that, a lot of the other pieces of the puzzle, which we just went through, could, potentially be affected. And perhaps even like having the conversation about like there's also like IRS tax audit purposes, like there's just reasons why these things have to happen. So we all have that conversation and we know the why of why these things have to happen. And then the how becomes, okay, well, what are the tools, right? And so whether that's like finding something like Adaptive that can OCR read. And so like all that you have to do is take a picture. Now then the back office has that information, right? Because you've just taken a picture and it's gone into the system. Like those types of the hows and the tools really are born out of the what and the why, right? So like what is important? Doing it and doing it timely. This is why it's important. So if we can find a way to automate that process so that if George out in the field can just snap a picture and get it to Marjorie and Marjorie doesn't even have to sit there and do any data entry, it's now like coming up on a screen for her saying, hey, George sent in this invoice and it's for 123 ABC Street. Is that correct? And Marjorie can just go, yes. Now then, we've flattened everybody's time of what they had to do because George just took a picture. Marjorie just reviewed what the AI told her was correct, and she is able to move on and do some other higher level, higher value things.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's even like when you talk about like flattening the time, like I talk to a lot of builders and they look at this and they're like, time. Like I'm paying people to do this. It's not a big deal. It's not here, not there. And you already mentioned like the higher value tasks, Tonya. I mean, when you really think about the how, the tooling, how are we getting this done? It's more that we're getting the information faster to make better decisions. And it's not always about is the work getting done, it's how effectively is it getting done and what does that organic time delay add to us not being able to make decisions. So in terms of like reducing that friction of George being like, I don't like turning my receipts into Marjorie because I don't like going into the office. I like building stuff and it's July and my window in my truck is down and it flies out of my truck and I don't have it anymore, right? What are you seeing from a high value standpoint by eliminating those low value tasks as being more high level tasks, more high value tasks?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that can go into that, right? So again, a part of it is like having those types of conversations that start with that clear vision of like, why are we all doing this? And honestly, we can have the conversation all day about like, okay, what is the goal? The goal is to get, these receipts back into the office and here's why. And I think that's like sort of a subset of what probably helps George and Marjorie to want to do these things together, which is, hey, we as this premier organization in this locale are the ones that are offering the highest level of home building services in the area. And people know when they call us that they're getting high quality work and that they're dealing with a really professional team. Like if we're having those conversations with both George and Marjorie and they're bought in on that. So like, hey, what is it that we do in this space, Marjorie? And she's like, well, we're like the highest end builder in the neighborhood. And okay, like why is that important? Well, because it's important. Like I like it that I work with this really professional high end team, right? All of that like higher level vision coming from the ownership down is part of what then ties together the like, okay, well that's why we're getting the receipts back in, because that's what professional home builders do. And we all agreed when we were having this conversation around vision that we want to be the most professional, high quality home building company. We agreed to that. So the reason, George, that's part of the reason it's super important for you to get this back to Marjorie is because that's a professional look.
Yeah. 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 What on this, so I think what you're basically pointing out, which I think is spot on, maybe a lot of the small builders don't necessarily have it incorporated in their business, is what you're talking about. Like you can have a vision, but ultimately that vision needs to tie back to like key metrics, right?
Yeah.
So you can measure things over time, right?
It has to tie back to key metrics, and it has to tie back to like incentivizing and exciting the team about what we're even doing.
Yes. Yeah. So the vision I think does get everybody excited, right? But then it's like everybody in a room that's excited. And if you don't have the metric, then you forget in a month. It's like,
right.
well, are we the best? Like you kind of agree on something
right.
and then you revisit that. What
and
else?
that goes back to what I said earlier about whose responsibility is it, right? So we could all be like, we want to be the most professional team. And part of being professional means we're going to like make a phone call every 30 days if something goes over the 30-day mark for, how long since we sent out that invoice to the client. But if then we don't go on and say, okay, but George, Marjorie, is that your responsibility or yours?
Yeah.
Like if we're not really clear about what should happen next, then it all kind of crashes.
Yeah. All right. So with your 90-day remodel, then how do you know if someone needs a 90-day remodel? Like you kind of, you had one question like, hey, what are your day sales outstanding? If they don't know, or they never heard about it before, then maybe that's a sign. What are the other signs?
Yeah. Like, do you know right now how much money you owe to subcontractors and suppliers? And do you know what your plan is for when all of those bills will get paid?
Okay. How many people know the answer to that?
Not very many that call us up.
What? Why do you think that is? Because the like QuickBooks has some tools for this, and project management software sometimes has some tools for this. Maybe not as much on the cash flow side, but like, why do you think it's so difficult?
I think again, I'm just like I'm not like trying to sound like a broken record, but I really do think it's because we're not putting enough emphasis on these types of things being important to managing the business, and we were putting a lot of emphasis on what's happening out in the field versus what's happening in the back office, right? And so I think that it's unfortunate because I think at some point we start to see like when we don't know the answer to that question, we suddenly might wake up one morning and realize we also don't know if we can make payroll next week because we didn't plan ahead. And so I think that's where, to your point that you said much earlier, Reece, there's this missing synergy because it's not recognizable right up front that installing the electrical, installing the roof, putting up the timbers is just as important, or is equally as important as making sure that we're bringing the cash in and making sure that Marjorie knows it's her responsibility, if that is where it lands, to call and make sure that we're bringing those things in, and that Marjorie knows it's her responsibility to know how much of what's coming in needs to also be paid right back out to subcontractors and suppliers, right? Like those two things really have to tie together, which is a big piece of the 90-day remodel as well, in terms of like, one of the things we like to do is set up like envelope style systems where every single job has its own cash bucket, if you will. So I know when cash comes in for a job, that's the cash I have available to pay out subcontractors and suppliers for that project, right? And so, but someone has to manage that. So from the vision, it has to be clear that this is how we want to manage. We want to manage in a very professional way. We want to know that we can pay all of our bills. We want to know that we can make payroll, but we can't do that unless we have this vision for the back office and the field being synergistic.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
Alignment is what I'm hearing. Alignment. We got to be aligned. We got to be aligned as an organization. A lot of where this friction comes from is like the mundane tasks, right? And the lack of delegation of who's taking care of these tasks, who's responsible for holding the team accountable to these tasks. That accountability comes from vision.
Yeah.
These kind of sound like, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds like these like simple, maybe not easy conversations, right? I say that often on this podcast, but they sound like pretty like you can sit down and have them. But I think a lot of builders, they kind of need that direction from a professional to say, it's easy to say we want to be the best builder, but what does that actually look like? What's the, what do you say? The what, the why, the how, right? Walking through that process.
Yeah. I think that's very true. And I think, again, I have learned this as a business owner. So I want to just like be really clear, like I'm calling myself out. I think a lot of business owners, myself included, I really did this when I started the Profit Constructors, are really good at their trade. But they haven't thought through like the whole mindset of a business owner. And I think that one of the biggest things that that tends to happen then is like we just go out and start doing the trade, but we do not know what overall success looks like or the vision of, how are we going to measure that success? And so ultimately, every piece of that 90-day remodel, when we come in and we're doing it, yes, the goal is to give you certainty and peace of mind within 90 days. But the bigger overarching goal is for us to start really walking you through like, what does success look like for your particular organization? And how can we help you reach that level of success? And so it's like, really, a lot of times I see it within that 90-day time frame. We're talking to folks, and you can just see the key turn and the lock and click, right? Like you unlock that piece of the mind. We're like, oh, I don't really know what success looks like. That's why we've been struggling through this for so long, because I didn't even know how to tell Marjorie how to go and make sure that we knew what day sales outstanding was. But now I do. Now I see the goal, right? And so that's every bit of it is like helping them understand for them, not for the builder down the street, not for their trade, their supplier or their subcontractor, but for them, what does success look like in their business? And from that, we can unlock a lot of these tools. We can unlock a lot of these pieces.
Yeah. And then, so Tonya, once you get a tight process in place and everyone's aligned, what does the Profit Constructor services look like after that? So you've set everything up and it should be, roughly running well. I was going to say roughly a well-oiled machine, but I don't know if you can say that. And so,
roughly well-oiled.
Yeah, you're roughly well-oiled.
Are you sure that's not alcoholic beer over there?
Yeah,
exactly.
Maybe it is. Like, so what are you how are you typically working with clients after? Like, what's required once the initial setup's in place?
Yeah, the goal after that, once we've gotten them through that sort of 90-day remodel and the certainties in place, the goal after that is then to really dive into some higher level things like and again, we help you run with the big dogs. So we're always focused on some level of growth. That doesn't have to be revenue growth, although it could be revenue growth, it could be profit growth, but it could also just be growth in leadership, like understanding, what's the next step to take to help get everybody in alignment, right? And so no matter what, so we offer outsourced controller services. We'll do day-to-day bookkeeping for you too. If you just don't have Marjorie on staff and you need that, we will do that. But then beyond that, past that 90-day remodel, we offer outsourced CFO services, which is, like now we're looking at like, okay, now that we've built to this size of home builder, maybe we want to diversify and do remodeling, or maybe we want to be a bigger home builder, whatever the next piece of the vision is, we're going to help you figure out how to pull the right levers to get to that next piece. And then we also even offer like leadership and business coaching services.
Okay. And just for everyone to understand, so the day-to-day bookkeeping is like a lot of what we were just talking about. Right? And then the controller services can you describe that a little bit more? And then that is making sure that the day-to-day bookkeeper is entering the data effectively and correctly, and then just giving you back the right data. So all the KPIs and metrics that we're talking about, those then at that controller level are then compiled back so that the owner now can take what that day-to-day bookkeeping piece is doing and take that and say, okay, here's actionable insights from that. Are we meeting these metrics that we talked about, right? So like day sales outstanding. If that's one of the first things we're talking about in the AR portion,
The controller services is putting all that together, compiling it into reports, reconciling the books, and then handing you back the data and saying, "Okay, here's what your true days sales outstanding is now. What do we need to do about that if it's not in a good spot?"
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Reece, what do you think?
I think, and I think of this through the lens of like software, talking to a lot of builders, hearing a lot of the friction points, the problems. I look at this as like, it's worth spending the time to have the conversation first off around like a 90-day remodel service. Someone like Tonya, internally as an organization, whatever, mainly to set up the foundation as an org to get the mundane required task as executed on, with the intention of getting to the higher level, controller level insights into your business. What can we consistently and repeatedly do month over month over month to have a really confident, firm pulse on our business? And that's where, again, there's so much service out there. There's so much software out there. And I think when you are really talking about these types of business practices, you've got to highlight it as a business owner and be real about, we can say till we're blue in the face, we want to be the best, but maybe we don't have that vision or that clarity, and we need to start looking at other alternatives.
Yeah.
Service, software, really taking this seriously. That's my take. That's what I'm getting from this.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think the word sticks out to clarity. I think Tonya brought some nice clarity to the process today. The way you explain things, the way you explain the importance of the back office and the field being in sync, all that stuff, I thought was a great overview. So
real quick, I want to know, Tonya, you mentioned that there's a lot of builders out there. That's, when they come to you, a lot of them need this 90-day remodel. Obviously, you guys are rolling this out and you're going to want to go, guns a-blazing in 2025. 9 years of experience in the organization. How many builders actually do you think have a strong pulse on their books and have this executed as opposed to the ones that need it?
That's a loaded question, Reece.
Ballpark. I know. But I think this is good for the listener, honestly. Because I think a lot of people look in the mirror and say, I'm in great shape. But it's like, are we?
Yeah.
Where's the room for improvement? I think that clarity is good to hear from a professional that talks to builders on a regular basis.
So I would say this, and really, so we sent out to our clients not that long ago a survey, and it was a 1-question survey, and we asked them to do one thing. And that was to tell us overall in life, not just in working with us, not just in their business, but overall in life, what was the one word, and we gave them 6 different words that was most important to them. And on that list of words was certainty. And overwhelmingly, our clients said that certainty was most important to them. So I would say, if you feel like you do not have certainty around who owes you, what you owe, or if you can make payroll next week and what cash is flowing in and out of the business, if you don't have that certainty, then you're probably on that list. And I think it's a high number. I hesitate to put any percentage points around it because I don't know. And it depends on size, right? And where they're at in their journey. But
of course.
But if you don't have that certainty, if you're sitting listening to this and you think to yourself, you know what, I don't have that certainty and that's important to you, then definitely it's the time to have this conversation.
Tonya, I think that's a beautiful way to phrase it. And I think even just I think that's just human nature, right? You all want to have certainty. You want to have certainty that you could do certain things. And I think that's a great way to phrase it. Like, just ask yourself the question, are we confident that we're doing this? And I bring this back. We did a blog post with one of our consultants. She was working with someone, successful business contractor. She did an audit and found $5 million in unbilled cost.
Yep.
This is someone who's living a lifestyle, paying employees, growing a business.
Yeah.
You might have that certainty, but then when you really start to pull the curtain back and you say, wait a minute, actually, there's a lot of opportunity there. And this isn't about shaming anybody. It's about bettering a vertical, a community of business owners that historically have a hard time handling and managing the extreme number of payables and the extreme number of receivables that contractors deal with in large zeros, large volume.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's kind of funny that all these people chose entrepreneurship, but then they love certainty. I don't know about that. Seems like we
can do a whole other podcast on the psychology of construction company owners. That's a whole separate podcast.
Yeah. But one thing I'd say, Tonya, which we didn't talk about as much, but it did, you bringing this up did make me think maybe we should have talked about it a little bit, which I think could be part of the 90-day remodel. Is there are probably 2 pieces to this. There's there's like the certainty that these builders or trades have in their numbers, right? So like top to bottom, are you like, do you have really no visibility into your day sales outstanding, or do you have great visibility? So high certainty. And then you kind of touched on this a little bit. How much time are you spending to get to that certainty, right? So it's like you're spending no time on your financials, which means you probably have zero certainty, or you're spending tons and tons of time to get that day sales outstanding. So it sounds like you also, as part of your 90-day remodel, audit the process and make sure the process is streamlined and efficient, because we do see a lot of construction companies that have tight financials in place, but it's the way they get there is like brute force, brute force and super inefficient.
Not to call anyone out, but I had a conversation with a software that has been around for a long time that's for construction companies, and I asked them, like this, like I didn't use the word clunky, but their software is very clunky, and I just said, like, why is it so incredibly hard to like move information through your software? And they're like, because job costing is hard, and I do not like that answer in any way, shape, or form. And so I think that's a big piece of like I said, I've been posting a lot about cash management and about all these kinds of concepts on my LinkedIn this last month. And one of the things I think I just wrote a couple days ago is like, simple is success, right? And so to your point, if you can get a great level of certainty, the idea for me is that we should take all of these answers to the what and the why questions, and when we boil it down to the how, it should be the simplest path from point A to point B to get us to the certainty.
Yes. I think that's a piece that people don't think about as much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Innovating.
Well, and I think because they start with the how. This is really where I think we all tend to turn it on its head, because we're like, I need to know days sales outstanding. How do I do that? Instead of saying, okay, well, what is days sales outstanding? What is it? Okay, have a full understanding of like, okay, it's just how long is it taking for someone to pay me? Okay, why is it important for me to know that? Well, because we have these when we narrow down the what and the why, I think we get to a simple how, but I think often we flip that on its head and we start with like, okay, go find out days sales outstanding. And then we just hand that over to Marjorie and she's like, okay, that seems like a really important metric. I'm going to make a very complicated system so I can hand that metric back to my boss every month, right? So I think that's where that synergy gets lost, because we don't have all the stakeholders in the room and we don't have a clear understanding of the vision for this thing.
Yeah. I think that is a great point. That's definitely that's maybe like how the initial inefficient process gets put in place. I think how it stays there is once they're getting that number, once they're getting day sales outstanding, they're like, whatever, I'm going to solve a different problem. I'm not going to revisit my processes and make sure they're efficient. And I was, if you just think about like how the best organizations in the world operate, they don't do that, right? I was speaking with a friend who worked at Apple, and they told me that as part of their performance review, one of the questions they're asked in their self-review is like, what parts of your job have you automated in the last quarter?
I love that.
So people are like constantly measured on like, are we figuring out ways to work more efficiently? And we don't see that very often in the construction, at least, I mean, it depends on who you're
I'll
speaking.
call out my industry too. We don't see that a lot in the accounting industry, but it is literally part of what in 2025 we're setting up as a metric for our team member inside our accounting is how lean are we being, and are there ways we can automate? And that will be something we're tracking in 2025 at the Profit Constructors.
Cool. All right. Well, Tonya, I think you're a wealth of knowledge on the accounting side. You're also, maybe you could offer some marketing counseling here. We got both Profit Constructors, Run with the Big Dog, and 90-Day Remodel. We got some good slogans here. So
we've got some good content here. Tonya, how do builders, contractors find you?
Yeah, they can just look us up at theprofitconstructors.com. That's our website, and it's probably the quickest. Or like I said, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Tonya Schulte.
SCHULTE.
SCHULTE. Yes, thanks, Reece.
Yes. Definitely worth the follow. Definitely worth getting in touch. Tonya, I appreciate you jumping on. Awesome episode.
Thank you, guys.